Okay, so I think it's time for me to introduce the first speaker. So his name is Mitko Tschimev. Hey, Mitko, how are you
Hi,
doing?
everybody. Really
Hey,
good.
welcome to the meetup. So basically, from what I've gathered about your profile, you're basically a passionate coding and a teacher of JavaScript technologies. You obviously love
Exactly.
Angular, right? You're part of our fun family. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's totally true.
Yeah, and I checked you out on Twitter, and I see that you tweet about like basically your tech experience, about the blogging, and I've seen some pretty cool stuff around NX DevTools and NX Deploy It, right? So
Yeah.
that sounds pretty amazing. Is there anything that I didn't tell about you that I should probably know?
I'm also the organizer of NG Dubai, and I'm already streaming live now from Dubai. So hopefully the connection is still keeps good.
Nice. Welcome,
And
Dubai.
yeah, but yeah, no, you introduced myself really good. So in my opinion, we can start.
Okay, all right. Then probably you share your screen now, and you can tell us all about shipping.
Sure. So hi everybody again. Um, everybody of us reached the point when we are done with our application, but now we are thinking about, okay, what is the next step? We have somehow to put our application somewhere in the cloud, and there are so many options, and it's pretty hard to choose what we are doing. So at the end, I want to show you how easy it is to ship your application with special requirements, which will show you later. So we know how to program our application. There are a lot of talks how to optimize our production build, but there's still a small gap in my opinion, and that's what I want to fill today a bit, and that's we want to learn how we bring our application to life. So how can we do this? For Angular, there are a lot of packages outside. You can find them. For example, ngDeploy from Azure. There's a package ngx as the AWS deploy for AWS. Then there's another one for Zeit and Now environment. And you can find a lot of other things. But all of them, they're pretty good for deployments. You can really easily create your account at AWS, Azure, then you install the plugin and you just run the deploy command and that's all. You have your application live. But there's a huge problem, in my opinion, and this helps you just for just a small start. But if your application grows up and it grows pretty easy and then really crazy scalable way, you know exactly what I mean. And then we need to find somehow, we need more just deploying my app. So we need to create kind of infrastructure resources and we need to know what we are doing. And these plugins, which are almost everywhere available, you don't know what happens. It's just magic and your application's live, but you have no idea what happens. Another problem is you can't customize them. For example, the Azure plugin, you deploy it, you have an Azure function, and that's all. It's pretty hard to customize it. And if you want to deal with multiple app requirements, it's pretty not possible. Um, and then there's one really big thing. So at some point, you don't want anymore this application. You want to delete everything. If someone knows exactly how Azure or AWS works or Google Cloud Function, it is so hard to delete all your resources. For some cloud providers, it's much easier. For others, it's pretty hard. And so for all these requirements, which I'm talking about, the plugins are not suitable for enterprise applications. I was coming with the idea to provide somehow support for all the developers. And what is if we can have both? So just imagine you have an easy setup for enterprise ready infrastructure. This would be awesome, right? So, and then imagine you can have even more. That's why I created a tool. It's called NX Deploy It. So NX deployed is a plugin made by the NX plugin system, but you can use it in an Angular workspace too. So don't be afraid about the word NX now. But of course, the main focus for me was NX, because if you build an application, it's not just Angular. Mostly you need a backend with Nest.js, Express.js, whatever. And so NX deployed gives you a simple setup. The infrastructure, and this is the pretty cool part, is written in TypeScript, mean you can even use the power of the NX workspace. And if you write shareable infrastructure as code, you can just start the affected comments, and you just see which application is now affected for some infrastructure code. Another thing is, all infrastructure code is in your repository. There's no magic or something. Everything what gets created as infrastructure at your cloud provider is set it as TypeScript code in your repository. And this is really something important which you need to understand, because you can customize everything. It doesn't matter what, you can customize everything on your requirements, and enterprise requirements are sometimes so crazy. And just imagine you need databases, you need different VPCs, and there are so many different things you need in enterprise applications. Everything is possible. NX deployed provides support at the moment for the 3 big providers, AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. But it is built as an kind of an adapter system. So if you would like to see an NX deployed something like DigitalOcean or all other different providers, it's almost pretty easy to write a new adapter and to extend NX deploy it. So it's community driven. Please feel free and contribute. Currently, we support Angular, Angular Universal, React, Nest.js, and Express.js. I think this is almost a huge, setup for a lot of applications around now. And one of the most interesting parts are, if you're not interested anymore in your application, which I talked about some minutes earlier, there's just one comment and you can destroy everything. Everything will be deleted for you. And this is pretty awesome. So how easy it is. So we need to create a workspace. How I said, you can use Angular CLI to create a workspace. Of course, you can use the comment from NX self. I prefer really a lot the NX workspace. If you never heard about it, just try nx.dev. You can find there any information. There's a really nice work from Nauro. Thank you so much, Nauro. And if you have done this, you just need to add the plugin that's done by ng-add, nx-add, working both. Then you give them the dev thought NX deployed. So these are the schematics at the in the back. And if you're done, you use the same comments like if you use the other plugins. You just say which project you want to deploy, and that's all. Everything will be done for you. How does it look like? This is what I want to show you. So I prepared something because it takes, of course, a bit time to create now an NX workspace. So I created a workspace and some projects inside just to see what is possible. So we have a backend project, we have a front-end project, and we will focus just to them, but there are different projects too to see what happens here. And so what we will do now is exactly what we saw. I have the project already, so I will do only an npx nx add dev thought and the NX deploy it. I just run this command and then just give it a bit of time. I have done this before already. So normally it's installed all the required packages. Here it's already installed because it takes a bit of time. Why it takes a bit of time? I was of course not creating everything from ground. I'm using at the back Pulumi. Pulumi is an infrastructure as code tooling, which uses almost everything, or is almost the same like Terraform, but you can use your preferred language. You can use TypeScript, you can use Go, I think C#, I can't remember exactly which languages they support, but of course TypeScript was fitting here perfectly, so I was using TypeScript here. And I can decide now what I want to deploy. So let's concentrate on the backend and the front end from this both projects. So we have the Angular project at the front end and the Nest.js at the back end. If I selected them, I can enter hit enter, and then I will be asked to decide which provider I want to use. I like a lot Azure because the setup is pretty easy, but you can use AWS, Google Cloud Platform, depending on your preferred choice. So let's use Azure. Then he will ask you which location you want to deploy it. So we are in let's see, where is it? North Europe. Let's choose North Europe, the root of ngVikings. And so it will create everything for us. The infrastructure as code. It creates a separate file structure for you with all the code and installing all the dependencies which we need. So this means the Pulumi, which is in the background, which is working, needs some plugins for example, Azure or AWS, and it installs the packages now. So let him install a bit. It takes a bit of time, and this time we can check what it's getting created. So this is exactly what I mean. There's no magic behind. You can understand completely what gets created. Here we have our front end. This means the index.js is our entry point, and we can see directly. Let's increase the font a bit. For sure, it's too small. Here we go. This was the wrong. Yeah. So I hope it's readable now, and you can see directly what happens exactly. You can see what you shouldn't touch, otherwise the plugin is not working anymore. Pretty easy. And everything what needs to be done for the Angular project now to have it on the in the cloud in Azure can be read here. And for the beginning, of course, if you never use infrastructure as code, it's a bit too much to understand immediately. But just give it a try, read a bit. It's easy to understand, and at the end, you can extend it for yourself pretty easy. The same for the backend. You have the same structure. You have a folder infrastructure, the same entry point index.js, and that's all the magic. It's a bit easier because there we just deploy an Azure function, and the other in the front end we deploy the CDN and a bit more things. So at this time it should be already done or not. Okay, let's give it a bit more time. And so what I mean with everything is in your hand. You have the code here. For example, we have the backend, and I can easily create, for example, if I want the database and MongoDB. It's about 12 lines of code. I was writing a blog post about it. You can take a look later, or I can post it later. And there you can see how easy it is with 13 lines of code to create a database with Azure just in this code and to use it. So I really would like to hear feedback and just that you give it a try. And haha, hey, we are done. Fine. So, okay. So we have our both applications now. And let's say we want to deploy now our backend first, because that our front end needs to talk to our backend, and in the cloud, of course, the front end needs to know where is my backend reachable. So that's why we need to deploy first our backend. So we just run npx nx ng run, doesn't matter, ng run. So the name of our front end was the name of your application, or of the Angular schematic project structure, everything. The actions you should know, or take a look at the builders and documentation at Angular. So we take the project name, ngVikings front end at that point, ngVikings front end, and we tell them what to do. So we want to deploy it now, hitting enter, and of course error is coming. and this is not cool. Let's see what happens. Normally it should work. Of course, every time in presentations, the same. Okay, so what happens? It will create a deployment in Pulumi, and Pulumi is open source. They have a paid version too, if you want to have a nice view of your resources and everything. But you don't need to use it. It's open source, and you can still use it. And which is important to understand, in infrastructure as code, you have a state, and this state needs to be somewhere saved, because every time if you're starting your deployment again, it checks that your current state to know exactly what are the changes in your infrastructure as code, and this state is saved somewhere. So at this point, I'm using Pulumi, and I'm saving this in the Pulumi cloud. It's for free, I think, for some projects. But you can use AWS, you can Azure, so store it in AWS S3 bucket, in Azure somewhere. So in Google Cloud Platform, you can save it too. They have a pretty nice documentation on Pulumi how to do this. So don't be afraid to use Pulumi. And because you see at the beginning they're surprising or something. No, they provide an easy to use functionality, but you don't need to use it. You can set up for yourself all the things, which is not so difficult. Okay, let's try it again. Oh, damn it. Okay. What went wrong? npx, ng-run, ngVikings frontend deploy. Let's try the backend. Something went wrong. Can't find the module. I don't know why. Let's try it again. Okay. So how does it look like? We have to improvise a bit. It looks like this. I have as well a GIF animation where you can see it, and the time is running. So you can find on the repository everything what you need for NX deploy it. And how does it look like? You have the GIF animation. So you saw already how I used the applications which I want to deploy. I choose the location, and then it gets created, installation, then I make the deployment. And this is the interesting part. So you get kind of a preview, what kind of resources needs to be created. And if these resources which needs to be created are okay, so take a look. Then you can tell him, yes, please now deploy it. And you will see how everything is deployed, and you get some outputs which are defined in your code. And these outputs are predefined for you for an easy entrance. For example, the node endpoint, so the endpoint of your API, or in the front end, you will see as an output, of course, the endpoint of your static files. So pretty easy in the wording. So you should easily recognize what are the right outputs for you. So maybe something happened there. So if it will not manage to work, so take a look here at the page, and then you can see a quick GIF animation how it will look like. So installation complete. Let's try it again. It looks good. One. Let's try it again. The backend, we will deploy it. Okay, it takes more time. Looks good. Yes. So, okay, this looks good now. For some reason, it was not installing the package. There's one thing which I am using in the deployments of the backends. If you use serverless, it's a bit complicated to provide the required file. So I'm using a special package from site. It's called an NCC. And what you can do there, you can bundle all your dependencies in one bundle. And this is what I'm using. That's why you see this comment here. I'm bundling all what I need for my serverless application in just one file, and this file gets deployed now in the cloud. And this is what I was talking about. I'm creating now a preview update. It tells me exactly what needs to be done. So he will create a new stack. Stack means my application, the state, and then he will create an archive function app, which is just a simple Azure function which uses zip, and puts this online. Because the installation was not working, we saw I have to install now everything manually for some reason. npx pulumi. There we go. Pulumi install. Yep. Was it? Ah, man. That's the bad thing if the installation is doing for you everything for you. You can't remember the comments. So I really have no idea how it was to install the package. But anyway, manage plugins. Ah, yeah. Like this. Ah, yeah, installed. There we go. No. No. Okay. Let's skip it. Okay. So we saw just a small peek of it. And so you will see exactly this, and of course without an error, hopefully. And it will ask you to say yes or no for the installation. And after you installed everything, it should work for you. And everything is then deployed. So you get at the end your output variable in the backend, and you use exactly this one in your front-end application. How you do this via environment variables or in your code, of course, you're using at the end the environment variables, but it's completely up to you how to do this. You can use .env files, whatever you want. The important thing is just deploy first the backend to get this endpoint and then put it into the front end. Good. Let's continue here. View and screen. If we have time at the end, we can try it again, but let's continue. So what are supporting? We have now serverless applications which we can push to the cloud, which means you can push Nest.js, Express.js. These are, I think, the most typical Node.js frameworks. I prefer Nest.js, but it's up to you. And what's coming next is Kubernetes support. So a lot of people are using an enterprise level Kubernetes, which means we want to support this too. And we are working hard on this, and hopefully we can release it this week. At the end of the week, a new version, or a first version, better to say, with Kubernetes support. This means if you create the application, Nest.js or Express.js, he will ask you an additional question if you are adding this plugin. And this question would be, do you want to support your application as Kubernetes or serverless? You can choose what you want, and it will do all the setup and creating the required TypeScript files for it. The next thing is it's not just Kubernetes itself. You can even choose between a shared cluster or separate cluster. Both of them have their pros and cons. It's up to you for what you are deciding, but you will have to, the choice for both. So what does it mean shared? A shared cluster means you will use one cluster, Kubernetes cluster, for all your backend applications in an NX workspace, for example. Or the separate cluster means you will have, and of course, in every application, your own cluster. But how I said, depending on your requirements, both concepts have their pros and cons, and just choose what you want. The next thing is better documentation, of course. So this was kind of a hobby project, and it was growing pretty fast. And the documentation, of course, like everything, needs to be getting so much better. And after the Kubernetes support, we will completely concentrate on the documentation, and we will be really helpful if you're using the plugin already in the next days and next weeks, and give us feedback just to know what can we do better in the documentation. Do you need more examples? Do you need more explanation of the comment itself? Whatever, just give us some feedback, and we will try to do our best to give the entrance as easy as possible. That's almost all. Let's check how many minutes do I have. Can anybody give me some feedback how many minutes I have? I think I have around 5 minutes. Not sure.
I think you should have few more minutes. You should be good.
Okay.
If there's one more thing you want to show.
Yeah, I will try now the front end, or I will create quick a new project because I was testing before the presentation something, and maybe I missed something up. So we can see how easy it is to create an NX workspace. Wait, this is of course the wrong directory.
And by the way, you're doing great. Doing live coding is super hard, and
I know
things can go wrong.
I know. So new try. Let's give it a new try. Hopefully, it's installing everything a bit quicker.
I'm sure we can do some drum rolls and stuff for you if you want.
Yeah, but yeah, you don't need to be sad. I have 2 blog posts about the introduction of what I'm talking about, so you can read about it. It's just 5 minutes. It's pretty easy with a lot of screenshots. Then you can try it, and additional part 2 with extending with a database and everything. So if this will not work now here, of course, please try the blog posts, and there everything definitely works because they're screenshots.
Absolutely. I mean, like, yeah, you basically, it was not that you made a mistake. You did it on purpose. You just want people to come and see your blog post, right?
So yeah, let's try the Angular Nest setup. Yeah, because we want now Angular Nest. I'll give it a ngVikings name. Oh,
I love Nest. So cool.
Yeah, definitely. I can just recommend it, guys. It's so easy to set up. It's has a really nice support to deploy to the cloud. Guess where?
Surprise, surprise.
And yeah, just try it if you never tried it.
Yeah, I moved from Express to Nest. That was pretty sweet transition. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Of course, I didn't not prepare myself with links to the blog post, but just follow my Twitter. You can see my Twitter account, or just search for the Twitter account, and you can see there are some in the recent last posts the links to the blogs, to the articles, and there you can find everything. So I think had enough time to copy.
Excellent. And we can also probably share your Twitter handle on Twitter.
Yeah, sure.
We'll be able to find you.
Will be nice.
Can definitely do that. Almost there. I'm surprised that Node didn't kill your internet connection.
Yeah, it is pretty slow, everything now, but that's every time we're streaming. Every time when I stream something, the rest is just working slow.
Yeah, I have the same feeling. That's why it's kind of risky to do it sometimes. Something that is requires heavy processing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what's happening now, right? So basically, we're doing the last installation of the packages, and after that, what will you do?
So yeah, what happens now is, so if you create an NX workspace, of course, he creates now the files which are necessary, and now he's installing all the dependencies. Means so he needs to install all the dependencies of Nest.js, which are already some of them, and of course he needs to install the dependency for Angular. So if you are creating an Angular workspace with the Angular CLI, even this one takes of course a bit time. And exactly this happens now in the background. And if this is done, we have kind of a blueprint created by NX for you. And this one is already working pretty nice, because you have the front end and back end, and the back end is already proxied with the front end if you just start the local machines. So if you start the local front end and the local back end, they can already communicate together. And after hopefully it's done a bit quicker, we can try it again with the plugin, and then we see. It would be really nice to show you the output of this Pulumi, because this is one of the really most interesting things to see really what happens. This is where it's like so much.
So cool. Maybe while we're waiting, we had somebody actually asking about NX. So could you explain the audience what's NX? And
of course. So in my opinion, or how I see NX, is it's just kind of a superset of the Angular CLI. It uses the Angular CLI, and yeah, I think it uses this under the hood, and it gives you the possibility, if you go, for example, to enterprise applications, to check what of your applications are affected. Because if you have multiple applications and multiple shared libraries, sometimes you get confused. Oh my God, I touched now this library, or do I affect now another team which is working in the same workspace on another application? And then you're sitting like this. I hope I don't destroy some code of another application. And this is where NX helps you really a lot. So they have comments where you can ask them, so please show me now what applications or libraries did I touch just with my changes in some library somewhere. And this is a huge benefit. And this brings you in a level when you work in the mono repository, kind of this concept of NX. And this is one of the really main feature, in my opinion, with the NX toolset.
Yeah, it follows through pretty much with the philosophy from Google, where you have like one mono repo for multiple projects, and they can share the code. And yeah, like if you need to build the library once, you build in one place. If you break it, you break it everywhere. But at least immediately you get answer as to what's going on and where. And I really love that part.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've seen projects of people building like desktop, web, and like mobile applications, separate projects, and reusing the code. It was beautiful.
Yeah. So definitely. So if you work in a bigger teams and you want to have a lot of shared code, I recommend NX. It gives you so much possibilities to do it much easier, and and they have much more features. So they can even you can even set up that one library just can use by another team in the special application, all this kind of things. So that you even can't import by mistake something wrong where you're not allowed to use it. So you can do a lot of setup there.
Yeah, it's definitely very powerful. So it's not something that you should build hello world type of applications with. But yeah, if you're talking enterprise or serious projects and multiple teams even collaborating, I think it's the best thing. Mitko, I think we probably have to move on to the next speaker.
Yeah, sure.
But like you mentioned, everyone can follow you or check your account on Twitter, and your blog posts are there, and they should be able to figure it out from there. This was really cool. Like this is the first time I actually seen this talk from your side, and I really enjoyed it. And hopefully I'll get to see some more in the future. And yeah, like I always give a lot of respect to anyone who dares to do live coding. I love doing live coding myself because I like to live on the edge, right? So congratulations, you did really well.
So if you ever wonder how NGNew worked, how it was able to create a new project from scratch and then make it all work, then this talk might be interesting for you. This is called Angular Schematics, the technology behind it. And today, our next speaker is going to talk about how to use it to create your perhaps own project starters. Fabrice, who is based in Norway, is not just a software engineer or a web evangelist, he's also an entrepreneur. And he actually founded K30 Group, the company you work for, right, Fabrice?
Yes, for sure.
That's impressive. Without further ado, we want you to be able to share your experience and your knowledge with all of the audience right now. So please, everyone, give a nice welcome to Fabrice.
Sorry, turn on the light. That didn't work. It's okay. Yeah, so nice to be here. Actually, a few minutes ago before going on, I had a crazy experience. My computer completely froze and I had to restart the computer. So yeah, my heart rate is around 100 right now. But luckily enough, here we are. So yes, I'm Fabriece Sumuni. That's my Twitter hashtag. And I work for K30 Group, which is a digital consultancy based in the west coast of Norway. Basically, we offer product development from idea to finished product. We offer design, development, and data science. And I have that out of the way. Let's talk about what I'm about to present to you. So, about 1 month ago, I was bootstrapping a new project. And I realized that I keep going through the same steps. I have some ideas of some libraries that I want to use. I go to the GitHub and I check the steps, and I have to do it manually all the time. And obviously, the steps might change, and I might forget one library, and then I gotta come back and add it. So I realized, okay, well, how about if I standardize this and figure out a way so I don't have to keep doing this? And the first idea to do that was to basically create a project and then clone it into a new kind of starter GitHub repository so we can use that. But then I was watching some talks, and then somebody was talking about schematics. Somebody, wait a moment, I can even do better. I can create a schematic that can just do ng add-on, and then I get everything. And everybody else in the company can use the same thing, and we have kind of same starting point. So the talk today, I'm going to present my case, which is basically how I am working towards automating the base of our projects in K30. What like a base project in K30, what does that look like? So obviously you got to start a new project, and then I want to apply strict compiler settings. These are TypeScript and Angular settings, so that everybody can kind of build safe code and from a better starting point. And then we use Prettier in the company, and I want to add that and all the configuration that follows that. We use StyleLint for linting the SAS files, LintStage and Husky obviously for doing linting the code after commits or before pushing to GitHub. And then lately there's a news project, Web Vitals, which is for measuring some important user-centric metrics. And I was like, okay, I could also add that as a base and then some analytics. And then depending on the project, you also can add Storybook for doing components development. And finally, the new kid on the block, Scully, for static site generation. This talk, I'm gonna focus on this first 3 steps, mainly because that's how far I've gotten in my project. but I do plan to finish and add the remainder. So step one, that's creating a new project, meaning we do an engineer and all the configurations we need there. Then we run the schematic, which will apply stricter settings and add Prettier to the project. All right, number one. So this is the standard one for everybody who has used the Angular CLI. You do engineer, the project name, and in our case, we do style is equals SAS, and then we add routing, and we might add some other configuration depending on the project. But this is basically the base we start with. Then, when you do an engineer, you get a tsconfig file in your project with some settings in it or flags. What I want for our project is that we apply the strict setting to true. We add the no unused locals, no unused params, remove comments, post consistent casing in file names. Those are for the TypeScript configuration. And for the Angular compiler, we add the strict injection parameters and strict templates. And then as a step 3, usually we do a yarn add prettier as a development dependency, and then we add the prettier configuration files. Okay, so these are the steps which we are going to try and recreate using schematics. So what is a schematic? And this is straight from the Angular.io docs site for schematics. It says a schematic is a template-based code generator that supports complex logic. It is a set of instructions for transforming a software project by generating or modifying code. If you look at the steps I provided earlier, this is basically what we're trying to achieve. So how do you get started with schematics? This is from the documentation site. It says install the schematics CLI as a global dependencies. In this case, I'm using Yarn with Yarn global add, or you can use npm -g to install the global dependency. Once you install that, you get a schematic binary in your path, which you can use to bootstrap a schematic project. And the way to do that is a schematic blank. In this case, I'm assuming blank is a template. So basically no template, do a blank, and then the name of the schematic which you're trying to create. In this case, hello world as a test schematic. Again, from the docs, this is explaining what is generated when you do schematic, when you create a schematic. In this case, if you look at the project structure, you see that there's a hello world directory under the source source src directory, and that's where the main the code, the logic for the schematic lives. And I would say at the same time in the source directory, there is a collection.json file. This is a kind of manifest of all the schematics that are in this project. So you could have multiple schematics. And if you look at the manifest, the factory is basically pointing to the file in hello world directory that has the logic. Okay, so when working with schematics, there's some concepts you have to learn. I'm not going to go too much into it. It's mostly for us. What I care about is the concept of a rule, and basically a rule is a function that takes a tree and a context and returns a tree. And what is a tree? A tree is a virtual representation of your project on disk. And something to note is that when you're running schematics, everything is running in memory. So you don't touch the disk until a commit phase happens. So somehow about how Git works, if you're familiar with that. All right. So in our case, once you have the schematic, what we want to do is we publish it to npm, and then in your project you can do ng-add, and then the path to your npm package, and that should basically run your schematic. And how does that work? So when you do ng-add, actually the Angular CLI is going to look for an ng-add schematic in the given project. So let's say you're adding, when you do ng-add at Angular /material, there's an ng-add schematic in material that defines what's going to happen when you add a material to a project. All right. So once you've created the project, you need some way to test it. By default, the build watch command is not part of the script. This is it's part of a package JSON. So I've added the build watch so that you can just run this and you keep changing the files, and it's going to keep building the output instead of having to do it manually all the time. So I'm pretty lazy, so is why I always find ways to automate things that I do repeatedly. Right? So you do yarn build watch or npm run build watch to start running the build, and then in another tab or another terminal, you can test the schematic locally by using the schematic CLI, and then pointing it to a schematic project. So in this case, we are pointing to the current directory by using a period, and then the name of the schematic we want to run. Remember, you can have multiple schematics in a schematic project. So in this case, we are saying we want to run the ng-add schematic. Right. So let's dive deeper. How does one write a schematic logic? The schematic logic. So in my short experience trying to create this project, number one, you need to know what you want to achieve. So you need to have a goal in mind. I found it helped to kind of propel me into discovering more about schematics if I know I want to achieve something, rather than just sitting there and playing with it. The next step is looking at examples that exist in the community. Right now, as far as I know, schematic, there's no like official documentation for schematics which goes deep into everything that's available. So the only way I've found to learn more about schematic was to actually read some schematics that are available, and obviously look at some blog posts that have been posted. So when it comes to documentations and blog posts, the first one is the one published on the Angular blog, introducing a schematic. It goes a little deeper and explains the primitives that you need to work with. I would strongly suggest reading that before doing anything else, if you're going to work with schematics. Next up is going to the Angular IO documentation site and looking at authoring schematics, which goes through an example. It's not very deep, but it gives you, it starts painting a picture of what to expect. And obviously, Manfred has a very interesting blog post on using schematics and writing custom ones, and obviously other sites. These are the ones that are found the most helpful when it comes to discovering how to use schematics. Next up is reading code. This is very, very strongly recommended, at least in the case of schematics. The Angular code base is very, very well written, so it's easy to understand. Again, I can't stress it enough. If you have a goal, it's going to be easier to kind of get something out of it than if you're just waiting for reading. Obviously, you can do that too, but having a goal kind of gives it more urgency. So when it comes to reading the code, I found the migrations in the Angular CLI is a very rich source of the use of schematics, because obviously as breaking changes are introduced in Angular, they have to write schematics to make sure everybody's coming over. So, and there's a wide use cases for schematics. So whatever you want, you can probably find it in the migrations folder. And then there is just the general schematics, the ones that come with Angular. So they generate components, services, and all the stuff to see exactly how it is done. And then the next step will be to actually look at some of the libraries you are using, the ones you used ng-add on, and see how they implement the schematics. That's going to give you an idea of how to go about writing schematics for yourself, but even for libraries that don't have schematics that a lot of Angular developers use. So that's an interesting way to give back to the community, which I do plan to do once I'm done this project. And then another thing is, the schematics give you a lot of like primitives. So you do need to do a lot to achieve some functionality. And since Angular has been writing schematics for a long time, they have built some utilities they use in their schematics. And again, as far as I know, these are not distributed on NPM. I might be wrong. Somebody please correct me. And in my case, I just went to GitHub and I copied the utilities, or should I say, borrowed the utility code into my project, and then so I can use that. And it's pretty well, it's self-documenting, so you can understand how it's meant to be used. All right, so I guess we can look at the code to see what I have so far. I hope this doesn't freak out like it did last time. So here I have a project. Let's see. So here's my project. There's the ng-add directory, which has my schematics, and on the same level, these are the utility functions that are files that I borrowed from the Angular code base. Okay, so if we go into ng-add, by the way, look at the collection.js, which is kind of the manifest. It's saying the entry point for the schematic is the index file with the function called ng-add. So this could be anything, as long as it's pointing to a function that's available in here. So if we look at ng-add and look at index, so here's our schematic. So the schematic takes any options. These are the options which you could pass to the schematic while creating. There is some more details on the documentation side about how to define these options and make sure they are validated and they're valid before getting in here. Chain is an interesting helper function that comes from the schematics, which allows you to chain multiple rules together. So in this case, I've disabled some of this because I want to show you how it is when you're actually developing and you wanna kind of test it locally, how you do it. So here we go. Let's pray to the demo gods that this goes well. So I have an apply strict settings function here, which is in the strict compiler settings file. Let's see through. So here it is. It's a rule, which means it returns a function that takes a tree and a context, and it's supposed to return a tree. So what happens in this function? What happens is we're defining so first of all, what are we trying to achieve? What we're trying to achieve is I want to read the existing tsconfig file and then modify it to suit my needs. So the tree class has a read function which takes a path. So in this case, we are reading the tsconfig, and remember the tree mirrors the directory structure in this case of an Angular project. So because I'm not going deeper into anything, so it's looking at the top level of the tree to read the tsconfig, and this returns a buffer, which is why I named it buffer. When starting, this was a little bit hard to figure out. I thought it was like a string, like a JSON string or something. So something to note: this returns a buffer. I'm checking that buffer exists, and I'm throwing an error if not. The context has like different utilities and different things to do. I haven't dug deeper into what the context does. In this case, you can access a logger from the context and log different informations. So once you get the buffer, here's one of these utilities I'm using: parse JSON IST. So with this function, you get abstract syntax tree representation of the JSON file. Mind you, I did this change after looking at the Angular schematics. My initial approach to this was actually reading the buffer, converting it into a string, and then doing a JSON parse to actually get the JSON out of it, and modifying the JSON directly. Modifying the JSON directly, and then serializing it back. But with the abstract syntax tree, it gives you more granular access to what you're trying to change. You remember, like this tsconfig supports actually comments. So if you're doing JSON parse with comments on it, most likely to fail because it's not valid. It's not valid. So by using the abstract syntax tree, make sure that you get the correct representation of it. In this case, we're checking if it's if this is an object. If not, we are throwing an error. And then a new function here, tree.begin update. So this allows you to basically, the way I understand it is like Git when you're staging changes, basically before you do a commit. So in this case, you get a recorder by calling begin update, and then you can use the recorder to basically should I say stage changes to the tree, and then once you're done, you can commit the changes. Okay, so let's look at one of these. I'm going to look at the apply Angular status settings. So I pass in a recorder to this and the tsconfig abstract syntax tree. Again, I'm using one of the utility functions. I borrowed it from Angular. Find property in IST object. And this is straightforward. If we look at the TypeScript config file, this is how it looks. It's got a compiler options at the top, and in an Angular project, you would have an Angular compiler option property at the top. So in this case, the tsconfig is the object, and then we are finding the Angular compiler options from the object. This is that simple. Obviously, the actual way of finding it is a little bit involved in itself. This is not much code, but it takes some getting used to understand what's happening. So it is good that by borrowing from Angular, you can kind of get what you want to achieve as fast as possible, and then diving deeper into these functions as the need arises. So we get the Angular compiler options. Obviously, for some projects, this might not exist. So I'm making sure that the Angular compiler option exists. And if it doesn't, again, one of these functions. See how like code reuse? I don't even have that. Just have to skim through the utility functions, see what's available, and then once I have that, I can just start doing my logic. So in this case, I have a append property in IST object. So I'm basically creating an Angular compiler options if it doesn't exist, right? So in this case, I just want to have these two flags applied. And then once that's done, I just return. Remember, everything is done on the recorder. So in this case, we've staged the changes already. All right, and if the Angular compiler option exists, then we go to the second case. In this case, these are the flags that I want to apply. So strictly speaking, I just need these two flags. But my thinking is, if you're applying this to a project that already have some flags there, you don't want to overwrite them, right? Also, you want to give people the ability to opt out of some things if it's not working out. Because if you just do strict templates, which is basically the the flag that covers everything alone, and then something starts going wrong, it's going to be hard to know, which options does a strict template provide. So by me adding them here, I make sure that somebody can go, oh, you know what? I'm going to turn off strict DOM event types because I'm not ready, or whatever the reasons are. Once with these flags, I just create a loop through them. I've created a function here that just makes sure that these are set to true. And then once that's done, another thing I need to make sure is that usually, so Angular has 3 levels of strict settings. So you have the basic level, which is basically there's like some minimal checking. And then you have a full template type check. And then you have the newest one, which was introduced with Ivy, which is the strict templates. So I make sure, like if I'm turning the strict templates on, I'm making sure that I remove the full template type check by, again, borrowing a function in the utility function called remove property in a IST object. Let's look at the ensure true function a little bit. It's probably not the best written one, but it works for its purpose. So basically, I pass in the recorder. The parent here is just whatever the parent is. In this case, probably going to be either the compiler options or TypeScript or Angular compiler options, and the flag that I'm changing. I find the flag in the parent. I check that if it's already set to true, I don't do anything. I just return. If not, I check if that is there, it's defined. Then this is we're diving a little bit deeper into the IST. By the way, there is a tool called the IST Explorer, which kind of gives you a visualization of how the IST is for side by side with the code base. So in this case, you have a token, so to say. So maybe like one line in the compiler settings, and then you get the start and end. And in this case, I'm basically removing I'm removing it and rewriting again and setting the value of it to true. And in this, if the option is not there, and then I just append the value. And the append property in Nest object is another utility function. Okay, so this is kind of like a deep dive to understand what's going on in this case of updating kind of JSON type of files. And the TS strict setting is basically the same thing, just happening with the TypeScript compiler settings, where again I could have just set strict true, but I'm also adding the other all the, so to say, options that fall under strict, so that people can opt out of them. And these are just settings that I like to use personally and in the company, which kind of removes unused code, so to say, and prevents some errors. All right. So let's build this and see what happens. So if you look at here, I have, after the commit, I actually log the output. So something else to note is when you run schematics here, it's actually running in debug mode, which means it's not going to commit anything to disk. So I'm going to build this project here. That was weird. Watch. Let's check the package JSON. Build. There we go. All right. So the builds, it found an error, probably because I'm not using something. Let's see. Running. Let's see. Start. Helper, but module cannot find. This worked a few minutes ago. Okay. Let's see. All right. Okay, I can't immediately figure out why I'm getting that error. So I'm just gonna move on to next. All right, so after running that, I add a schematic for installing and configuring Prettier. All right, so this is a different use case. In this case, there is actually the act of installing the Prettier package and the configuration of it. So here I have a list of the dependencies that I want to install, and I like to pin my dependencies and be explicit about updating them. And then get package JSON dependency. This is another utility function from the Angular project, which finds the dependency by reading the package JSON file. So it gets the dependency, checks if it's there, and if the version matches. If they do, I just I skip it and continue. If not, I add it. This is another one of these utility functions. I set the type. This is an enum with a different type of dependencies you could add. So let's see. Yeah, the default dependencies have peer and optional dependencies. So I use the I set it as a development dependency, and I set it to override if it's there. Once that is done, now I move on to actually adding. So all the adding the dependencies is taken care of by this helper function right there. So once I'm done, now I want to add the configuration files for Prettier. And there's probably multiple ways to do this. Either you could actually write them by hand, as in write the code for it, or you could actually set up default files that could import it into your project. And the way this is done is, I have a file. I think this is like a convention that's used in most schematics. So in the files here, I have added the files that I'm interested in adding to my project. So this is straightforward. Nothing weird happening there. So I use the apply function and supply the files by using the URL function. So this is going to look at the files under this directory. And then I call the apply templates function. This takes some options. So depending on how you want to apply the templates. So in this case, let's say if you look at how Angular ng generate works, you can basically pass in the names, and then there's going to be some kind of replacement happening and dasherization and all this kind of fancy things. So this is where you actually pass in different functions that are applied to the templates. But in this case, there's really nothing fancy happening. These are just the files with the right name, the way they're supposed to be. So I don't need to do anything. So once I apply the templates, I just move them to the, so this is, it moves in there. So you have to look at it from as, this is applying on the destination project. So the Angular project you are running the schematic on. So I want to move it at the top level of the project. So if you are like there's things happening as deep in the file system, then you would have / and yeah, whatever you wanna go with it. Right. Then once that's done, I call merge with prettier config source. So this returns a prettier config source, and I call merge with. Again, I'm not sure what merge with does, but this is just from looking at the way Angular is doing it to basically make it work my way. So after like I get it running, then I can go back and start digging deep into the code base and see, okay, what is happening in this case. Actually, if I have to make a guess, I will say the prettier config returns a tree. So basically, it's an own contained tree, and merge with is basically gonna merge that tree with your repository's tree. All right. Go back here. Okay. Then here, I'm actually like inlining a rule. So this is a rule. Basically, it takes a tree and returns a tree, right? So I'm inlining a rule inside here, and this rule is using one other utility helper function that removes the package. So this because basically the main reason for this package to exist is to basically install other packages. It in itself is not a library. So when you do ng-add, it's actually added as a dependency to your project. So at the end of whatever transformations I'm doing, I want to remove the library itself. So that's what's happening here. And then at the end of it all, I apply a lint fix, which is basically underneath is running the TS-lint fix to basically lint the code base after lint and fix the code base to make sure it conforms to the linting rules after all the transformations have been added. So that's basically what I have. It's not liking that I can't actually show you this, because this will be cool to see. Let me see. What are we on here? Oops. If there's somebody in the comments who actually knows what's going on here, it would be nice to show this running. Let's see. Maybe I need to install TSLib. Okay, let me try that. Yay! There we go. All right. So we just got the builds. You can see the build files. So I'm gonna comment this out so I can show you that's working. So I'm gonna run basically when you're developing, because it's actually installing to a project takes some time, you just run the schematic you wanna run. So in this case, I'm just gonna do schematics. Again, the period represents the project you're linting against. So in this case, I'm just linting against the project itself because you already have a TS config. So I expect it to do something. So let's look at the TS config again. So the TS configuration, I've intentionally set some bad values. So I've set strict to false, I've set strict null to false, all is to false, to make sure that it's doing the right thing. In the case, you just write tests to actually catch this. So and I do schematics and add, and then so this is the output. So let's look. Strict is set to true. Strict null is set to true. True. Remove comments. So all these things that weren't there before are there, and it's added the Angular compiler option, which wasn't there before. Right. So this tells us that this works, at least in the local test. Right. So this is the input, and that's the output after running this. And notice that this hasn't changed. So everything is this is in memory, right? So until they actually a commit happens, nothing is going to change. So if I wanted to change, I could actually run this with the debug false. Yeah, I don't want to do that. I mess everything up. All right. So now let's actually run it on a project. A moment of truth. So I generated a new Angular 9 project. So vanilla project. I can show you how it looks like. Temp 9 modulus tsconfig .json. You can look at, let's make it here. So that's basically the tsconfig. There's no Angular options in there. There's no strict. This is when basically when you generate a vanilla project without the strict flag. Mind you, the Angular added a strict flag, which adds some of the strict settings, but still there's some more settings that I add that don't come vanilla with the Angular CLI. So in this case, this is what we have in this project. So I'm gonna run my schematics. Oh, by the way, I forgot to enable this other stuff. So, right, so that's it's running again here. I got a new build. So, see this. What I'm gonna do ng-add here, and I'm pointing it to my project in this case. Right? Usually you point it to an npm, but it's basically the same thing. So I'm gonna do ng-add, and let's see how it goes. Should I say yes? No, for now. But sometimes I like to give the Angular team my data, so it's nice. So they can keep improving. All right, so let's see how it goes. Maybe Juan wanna jump in for a bit while we wait for this to run.
Absolutely. Thanks for summoning me that unexpectedly. Fabrice, one of the questions I had for you is, if somebody in the audience has never used the schematics before, where do you think is the right place to start?
When you say use, what do you mean?
Like if I want to learn the basic of schematics, is Angular IO the right place, or do you think there's other tutorials or there are websites that I could check out?
You mean to create the schematics?
Correct.
Okay, so yeah, it goes back to the presentation I had, because I was basically in the same boat. I was like, okay, I want to do this, but okay, where do I go? So obviously, the first thing is I'm going to go to Angular IO and the documentation, search schematics, see what comes up. Then I read through. It's a short introduction. You kind of get the idea. But then I was doing some research and pointed me to the blog introducing schematics, and that's the best place to start if you wanna like write schematics. It's very well written. It walks you through what is what. You get a better picture. Actually, they should probably put some of that stuff on Angular IO, to be honest. That's the best place to start. And then go to the docs look through that short introduction, and then go to the code base. It's invaluable to read through like some of the schematics, because you already know what they do, because you've probably been using them all the time. Now you get to see what's under, what drives them, right? And again, as I said, you don't need to go deeper. Like I'm using a lot of helper functions. I don't need to really understand them completely to basically use them if you want to achieve something, and then you can slowly get there. Yeah,
absolutely.
All right, so it's done. Yeah, you can stay, Juan. So it's nice to have you around as a backup. All right. So as you can see, this is the output. I forgot to remove the console log. So yeah, I should probably have a TS-lint rule to catch that. As you say, these two files have been created. TS config has been updated, and package.json has been updated. Let's look at the Git diff. If anybody is wondering why this is looking so nice, I got a tip from Mitko Tschimev, actually last year's ngVikings. Weird. I got a tip. It's a NPM package called Git So Fancy. So you get a really nice output about what's changed in the project. So if you look at from the top, with the Angular JSON, this is basically the analytics stuff I said no to. No big deal. That's not part of our change. And then, why does that keep? Oh yeah, I need to map through them. Okay, so look at the green ones. So prettier has been added to our package. TS-lint config pretty has been added. TS-lint plugin pretty has been added to our package JSON. Our TS config has been changed. You see all the strict flags that weren't there before suddenly are there. Something I couldn't figure out is it adds the commas before, while I like my commas to go after. So I spent some time trying to figure out how to change that. I was like, okay, it's not big. It's not a big deal, because I have ideally once everything is finished, I would have Husky and like the Git commits and all the kind of lint fixing happening. So it's gonna be fixed by that point. Or ideally, I'll probably figure out how to add the comments the right ways. So that's added, and then there's the yarn basically. And then, all right. So no need to look through that. All right. I have a look at its status. Here. Right. So basically, I've eliminated some of the manual work I do every time I start a project, and I'm making it consistent, because like now I can go back and make changes, make sure everybody's on board with what's happening, instead of like, oh, this lives in my head and only Fabrice knows how to create a project, nobody else can do it, right? All right, so I guess I'm open for questions.
So we also have Mitko with us. So we have some of the questions. If you want to ask him anything, this is also the time. Actually, I already told my Git that we had a question for him that somebody asked before. Yes, BDNECom asked, is this extension compatible with Azure DevOps for Mitko?
Yes. So if I guess I understand you correctly, you can use still the VS Code tools from Azure. So it creates the structure for the Azure functions with the special JSON files, and you can still redeploy it via the Visual Studio Code plugins, if I get the question right.
Yes, I guess.
I hope this is the answer.
Another question that I can see that just popped up by Salman Farsi is, what is the extension name for Git, the one you mentioned?
That was Git So Fancy. Let me, if you go to NPM and search for it, you should find it. Again, credits to Mitko Tschimev for pointing this to me. It's a really awesome plugin.
It was released a couple, not so long ago, right? Or
Well,
Is it a no?
no, not Git, but diff so fancy. So my bad. Diff so fancy, not Git so fancy.
Okay, if you don't mind, maybe you can just copy, then write the name in the comment, so people can just look it up.
Let's see, can I add to the comments? Let me put it here so you can post it on the.
Cool. Yes. Sounds good. Another question I can see that just popped up for Fabrice. Do you think schematics are ready? Schematics is ready for the production-ready applications?
I would say so, because Angular is using them, and Angular is the most production-ready project we have. So obviously, it mandates testing, really good testing, because it can really mess up your project. But again, if you're using Git, you can always revert back if something is not working, and you should be using Git. So I would say yes, it's ready for production.
If I can just dig into for just some small comments. So the plugin NX deployed is completely built with the schematic. So it's nothing else what I'm doing. All the things what were shown by Fabrice is exactly what happened there. The only difference is I'm using the NX plugin tool set, which provides you with already predefined unit testing, integration testing. So if you want to set up with all the things around the testing tool, and this is pretty, pretty dirty at the beginning. If you never touched this with schematics, they give you everything from scratch. So maybe you can try it there too for a good dig in.
Cool. Mitko, actually, I also have one question for you, and that is, I noticed in your repository that you started working on this project since January this year, or am I mistaken?
Yeah, I think so, around.
If somebody wanted to contribute, what is the first place to start? Should they reach out to you directly, post an issue, or how could people contribute to your project?
So the first step would be creating an issue with the feature idea. And then, of course, I'm seeing this, and I will definitely respond pretty quickly, because I like if someone helps. You know, open source is a nice thing in this case. And there's already a code of conduct and a contribution, how to contribute. Everything should be in place as far as I remember. And create an issue with the feature request, and then let's talk about it, and I will help as good as possible.
Cool. That sounds pretty good. So again, just a final recall for anybody in the audience. If you have any questions, any comments for Fabrice or Mitko, or for anybody in the ngVikings team, then this is the time to ask. If you haven't signed up for ngVikings, just go to ngvikings.org to find more information. We're looking forward to our conference. It's going to be amazing. We have plenty of speakers. It's going to be really fun. So yeah, we're going to give a little bit more of time for the audience to come up with questions, otherwise we just finish. In the meantime, I wanted to ask each one of you, how did you feel presenting live? Is this something the first time you done it, like live streaming and the whole thing, or are you familiar with this already? For Fabrice and for Mitko.
All right. So for me, actually, I did it first time with Angular Oslo, maybe a few weeks ago.
All right.
And it's always nerve-wracking. My heart rate is always at 100 every time. But it's I think it's a good way to get out of there, and you reach a lot of people. And obviously, I would say the organizing teams are amazing. So yeah. Nice.
Mitko, how do you feel?
Pretty good. So this with the heartbeat, I think this will never get you will never get lose this. You have every time this kind of adrenaline in your blood, but depends on how much you support get from the audience, and of course from the organizers. So even the managing these virtual sessions is not so easy, and you've really done a great job here. And if you're doing a great job, the speakers can completely concentrate on their on their job, and then it's pretty easy everything. So thank you, it was really great job.
Nice. I think you two did a great job. So it seems like we don't have any more questions from the audience.
I just saw one question.
Oh,
Someone
really?
was asking, if you can use Angular schematics for React.js, because this question is pretty interesting. Because first, if you think Angular schematics, React.js, this already sounds kind of weird. Does it really fit together? Yes, it fit together. There I have to get to point to NX plugins. NX is using under the hood Angular CLI, but you can use the NX workspace without to install Angular CLI or everything. They're doing some wrapping around. I have no idea what they're doing, but it's working. So you can create schematic plugins for React.js, for maybe Vue. So you can create a schematic for Vue, then NX could support Vue too. So there's everything possible. Just take a look, and it's working.
I also got to add that schematics itself is an independent project. So schematics itself is agnostic to the kind of framework you're using. So it just so happens that Angular has a CLI to basically understand schematic files. So as long as you have a CLI that understands schematics, you can do whatever. So in this case, NX has built a CLI that allows you to work with the other frameworks.
Absolutely. Cool. So I think we have one last question regarding the conference, and that's precisely the moment in which I'm going to invite the ngVikings teams